Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to get right to business this morning, as is my custom. Yesterday, we concluded the broadcast by reading from Roman Catholic periodicals that Roman Catholics, now that the Cardinal Wiseman had been admitted into the country and allowed to read the papal bull and to install his 12 bishops and to divide up the land into dioceses and to begin building the Roman governmental structure in England, that all of a sudden now the Roman Catholics of Great Britain were no longer going to obey the civil laws. They no longer regarded the Queen a queen. They no longer regarded Parliament a parliament. And they said, if Parliament should sit in session and pass laws, those laws would have no greater weight than a proclamation declaring the moon made of green cheese. And what was their aim? To overthrow the government and to replace that legitimate government with the papacy. To replace their constitutions, their bills of their laws, their bills of rights with Roman Catholic canon law. Clearly declaring that so long as it was necessary, Catholics were fair citizens. Excuse me. Fair citizens of Great Britain. But now that their Pope has free reign in the country, no more deal. We're going to serve the Pope because he's the voice of God. And our conscience dictates that as being good Catholics, we must obey our Pope, and we must obey his canon law. We're bound by conscience. And so the crown, the Queen, the Parliament, the Constitution are ipso facto null and void. It's just a bald-faced overthrow of the government, without apology and without equivocation. Just that quick. And remember, before the papal aggression, before the installation of Cardinal Wiseman and his bishops, and the dividing up of the land into dioceses, Roman Catholics were just meekly crying and playing upon the sympathies of their fellow Britons that they just wanted religious liberty. Just equal liberty with the rest of the Protestants of the country to worship as their conscience dictated. That there was no evil motive or wicked intent. They wished to remain British citizens like everybody else, but to be free to practice their Roman Catholicism. Completely harmless, they claimed. And they said that the laws that existed on the books were that seemed to suppress Roman Catholicism, well, they were an astonishment, an embarrassment to the country, a shame upon the country. And so, Britain seemed to become sympathetic, having forgotten their Protestant heritage, their Protestant history, and Roman Catholic history. All of a sudden they thought, well, they have a point. And so they started rescinding laws and not enforcing other laws. And immediately, Roman Catholics stand up and say, we're no longer going to obey the laws of the land. You see how their countenance changed? You see how so soon after the official recognition of the cardinal and the installation of the Roman Catholic hierarchy, the freedom to read papal bulls, all of a sudden now they've overthrown the Constitution, they've overthrown the crown, and they've overthrown Parliament, and they've installed the Pope smack dab in the middle of England, and they've declared England to be Roman Catholic and under the rule of the Supreme Pontiff, the representative of God on earth, the Pope. And they made no bones about it in their periodicals. It was their boast. And just that easy, they believed that they'd overthrown the country. You see what happens when you open the door just a little crack to a seemingly meek and harmless Roman Catholic? They come barging in with all the force of hell behind them. Now, we don't see that kind of force exercised in the United States of America today, not the way they've described it here in this book. But understand, the only reason that we don't see this kind of aggression in the United States of America, not to this extent at least, is because Rome has co-opted the government long ago. Quietly, stealthily. The Roman Catholic Church is the institution in Washington, D.C. They've got as much to gain by remaining low-key and just continuing their dominance of government in Washington, D.C. as to come out and with this kind of brusqueness, this kind of audacity to declare the Pope the King of the United States of America. They don't have to do that here. I mean, after all, Congress has invited the Pope to come speak and lecture them about morals, about charity, about immigration, about foreign policy. There's no need for the kind of brusqueness that Rome is using in England at this time. But the influence of the papacy is no less significant in the United States as it was in England at the time of the writing of this book. Now, James A. Wiley is trying to convey to his British readers the significance of what has happened. And he begins on page 92 to say, how often and loudly did papists reiterate the assurance that the aggression had in it no element hostile to the genius of our Constitution, the independence of our throne, and the integrity of our liberties, and yet a measure based on the grand primal element of our Constitution, that the Pope hath no jurisdiction in this realm, and in the mildest possible manner asserting and applying it, the papists tell us they cannot obey. Could you imagine a more severe condemnation of their projects as embodied in the papal aggression? Have not Romanists in this threat unmasked themselves before the nation? Do they not confess that British liberty and their designs cannot stand together? That canon law can be planted only above the ruins of British law? And that the throne of Cardinal Wiseman can attain its full development only when the throne of Queen Victoria is in the dust? Who can have forgotten how often and how solemnly the Pope's legate in London asserted that the rescript which he brought into the country carried only spiritual effects, and that what he said about dividing and governing the Queen's countries meant only a purely spiritual jurisdiction? Well, here is a bill which gives him full latitude in spirituals and only forbids the assumption of secular titles and the exercise of secular jurisdiction, and yet it cannot be obeyed. Remember the Ecclesiastical Titles Act? All it did was forbid the Roman Catholic priests to declare themselves Archbishop of, and then a specific British territory, like Londonderry, excuse me, or Canterbury. It was just a very, very mild attempt to keep the cardinals and the bishops from assuming temporal jurisdictions, to make sure that they kept themselves to what they promised in the first place, to just be spiritual authorities among Roman Catholics. And even that mildest bill, the Ecclesiastical Titles Act, is now dashed to the ground, brazenly dashed to the ground, as no law at all. It's no more worth than if the Parliament had assembled to make a declaration that the moon was made of green cheese. You see what happens when you sympathize and try to accommodate a seemingly mild-mannered Roman Catholic? One who only wants equal rights? The minute you do, in his mind, you've justified the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to come in and take over your country and make you a slave. Make you not only bound spiritually to him, but temporally as well. You make a sympathetic gesture to a Roman Catholic, you're apt to have surrendered your Constitution, your Bill of Rights, and your liberties all at once. Your form of government, your way of life. And you know what's just amazing about all this? This has happened so many times in so many places throughout history that it's unforgivable that the world keeps forgetting it. Look, the man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, is who he is, and he will remain who he is until Christ returns and destroys it. The Antichrist, the counterfeit Christ, will continue to deceive the world and enslave God's people and force them to disobey God's holy, eternal, and immutable law until Christ returns. And any nation on the planet that describes itself as independent from the self-proclaimed divine right of the Pope to rule without competition in the world is subject to overthrow at any time by the papacy, by any means, fair or foul. Now, the United States of America declared its independence early. So why are we not independent? Why are we now plagued with the papal plague? Why are Roman Catholics now writing the laws for this land? Why are Roman Catholics throwing our borders open for the arrival of other Roman Catholics who are not Americans, but papists, citizens first and foremost of Rome? And we dare not suggest that those borders are thrown open to allow Roman Catholics to come into the country. We dare not. That's bigotry. That's intolerance. You see, they plea upon our sympathy. They give us the guilt trip over trying to preserve our way of life, our Constitution, our Parliament, our Supreme Court. And you know why they target us? Because it's Protestant in character, just like was the government of England at the time of the writing of this book. It's a heretical nation according to the view of the papacy. It's brazenly declared itself independent of papal rule, independent of Roman Catholic canon law. And so long as it is strong enough to maintain that independence, it may, but not forever. The papacy is what he is and will continue to be what it is until Christ returns. Has Christ returned? No. Then we can expect, not suspect, we can expect Rome's continual, unlimited, determined, conscientiously demanded efforts to overthrow this heretic nation and claim it for the papacy by any means, fair or foul. Now, certainly no one who of sound mind would describe what Rome's attempts in Great Britain were fair or foul. It was foul. Rome has no conscience when it comes to this. Their conscience dictates that they only serve God when they serve the Pope. That they are only obedient Christians if they obey the Pope. That no law is any law at all unless it is countersigned by the Pope. And no country is a country unless it's Catholic. Now, see, he says, who can have forgotten how often and how solemnly the Pope's legate in London asserted that the rescript, or the papal bull, which he brought into the country, carried only spiritual effects? And that what he said about dividing and governing the Queen's countries meant only a purely spiritual jurisdiction. Well, here's a bill, the Ecclesiastical Titles Act, which gives him full latitude in spirituals and only forbids the assumption of secular titles and the exercise of secular jurisdiction, and yet it cannot be obeyed. He says further, had Dr. Wiseman's object been what he affirmed it to be, the government, by spiritual means exclusively, of the members of his own church, what possible quarrel could he have had with the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill? In other words, the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill did nothing to influence the cardinal's rights, or for the Catholics' rights in the country, to practice a spiritual jurisdiction. That's what he said it was all about anyway, just the spiritual governance of the church. So what possible offense could he see in the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill? Because all it did was prevent these apparently well-meaning prelates of the Roman Catholic Church from asserting any temporal jurisdiction in the country, to prevent them from becoming legal jurisdictions, binding its own laws, not only the spirits, but also the bodies of Roman Catholics and Protestants. There was nothing of offense to be seen in the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill if the cardinal was honest about what he intended to do in England. So why did he oppose the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill? Because they fully intended, from the very beginning, they're bound by Roman Catholic canon law to be a both spiritual and temporal government over every land. The Pope cannot be Pope if he's just a spiritual leader. He must be the King of Kings, or he has not fulfilled his office as Christ's vicar on earth. And I'm telling you, as unlikely as it may seem to some of you, this is still the claim of the papacy for all the world, and especially the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world. The Pope must not only be the spiritual, but the temporal ruler of this country, and he may command the full force and resources of this country to continue his conquest of the world, or he ceases to be Pope. Do you understand the moral and the spiritual imperative that I've just described to you? That's the way it is, and that's the way it's always been ever since the founding of that church. Because it stands on the premise that Peter, the apostle, was the rock and foundation of the body of Christ, the kingdom. And that the popes are Peter's successors, and that they have a divine right to rule the world, not just spiritually, but temporally as well. Just as would Christ rule were he here, as if he's not here to do the job. And that imperative will never depart from Rome. And you're seeing it being exercised, demonstrated, right here, 1865, in Protestant Great Britain. I mean, this writing is so instructive for us today. It ought to be mandatory reading in all the schools and in all the churches. It ought to be read on every public radio station, every public television station. It ought to be the talk of the nation. What happened 150 years ago in England? And then we might have a chance to recognize what's going on in Washington, D.C. today. And we just might find the spiritual and temporal fortitude to take back what rightly belongs to us. Christ the King. Protestant faith. And to purge this land of the idolatry that has overwhelmed it and made it subject to God's justice. We'll be back right after the break.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update. If you'd like to support Inquisition Update, please support First Amendment Radio. Look, the only thing I ask for from my listeners is prayer. Prayer. I take nothing for what I do here. This is a love offering to God's people. And it's not without cost. But I absorb those costs. It's my contribution to the truth. I don't seek to be a celebrity. I don't seek to be famous. I realized long ago that the hideous truth about Rome and the even more hideous truth about the apostasy of Protestantism in this country is never going to win me friends nor influence many people. And there's not a long line of people waiting to replace me should I expire, except those who would like to undo all that Inquisition Update has done over the last decade or so. And with my personal cost being so high, no one can accuse me of selfish motives. I'm here at my own personal, financial, and physical expense. Nobody in his right mind would do this voluntarily unless he was moved by the Holy Ghost. And all I ask of my listeners is prayer. Pray for continued strength. Pray for my longevity. That's my payment. I seek no gain in this life. No one will ever be able to accuse me, rightfully or otherwise, of doing Inquisition Update for anything like personal gain. And I only pray that God allow me to continue. That's all I ask. If you wish to contact me by email, please do so. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. Now back to the subject. Had Cardinal Wiseman's object been what he affirmed it to be initially, the government by spiritual means exclusively of the members of his own Catholic Church, what possible quarrel could he have had with the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill? The Ecclesiastical Titles Bill does not declare penal or criminal the holding of the most unintelligible and monstrous of the papal dogmas. For instance, the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill does not forbid Cardinal Wiseman or any Roman Catholic to believe in purgatory or in the infallibility of their church and their pope. They can believe that monstrous garbage if they want. Never mind what God's holy, eternal, and immutable law says. The Ecclesiastical Titles Bill does not seek to punish Cardinal Wiseman or any Roman Catholic for celebrating the Mass or praying to the Virgin. They can do all of these things under the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill. We won't make any mention of God's holy, eternal, and immutable law. We're just talking about the civil laws of Great Britain. The Ecclesiastical Titles Bill does not decree the shutting up of the confessionals of the Roman Catholic Church. They can still go to church and violate God's holy law and confess their sins to a sinful, wicked priest if they want to. The Ecclesiastical Titles Bill does not pull down Roman Catholic cathedrals. Never mind that we know from Scripture God no longer dwells in temples made with hands. And he says, we grant to Dr. Wiseman, Cardinal Wiseman, and what Dr. Wiseman would not grant us, liberty to hold any opinion he pleases and to preach it to from the housetops, provided it does not endanger the peace of our society. Nay, the bill grants him permission to assume any ecclesiastical title he pleases, provided it be not also a territorial title. This is what the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill does. And Dr. Wiseman's organ, the official magazine or publication of the Roman Catholic Church, tells us that the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill will not be obeyed. Could anything more completely satisfy all the former assertions of the Romanists? Let us mark how the tablet in the passage cited above, which we read yesterday, utterly ignores the Queen's authority and the Parliament's jurisdiction. In the true spirit of canon law, Roman Catholic canon law, which declares that the decrees of the Pope are superior to the constitutions of princes, that is, the constitutions of nations, in the true spirit of the infallible juris liguri, you've heard of me talk about the the demonic doctor, Alfonso Liguori, the great so-called doctor and jurist of the Roman Catholic Church, who recognizes only one authority and one jurisdiction in the world, the pontifical. Alphonse Liguori wrote volumes and volumes and volumes of dissertations proving, asserting, and guaranteeing that there be only one legitimate authority and jurisdiction in the world, the popes. That's what Alphonse Liguori said. And he's just one of the many doctors of the Roman Catholic Church who say the same thing. Now he says, in the true spirit of the infallible jurist Liguori, who recognizes only one authority and one jurisdiction in the world, the pontifical, in the true spirit of that ultramontanism, which is taught by the help of British money at Maynooth. Remember, they were establishing a college with British money to build a college that would teach Roman Catholics Liguori's philosophies. He says the tablet declares, quote, both the Parliament's bill and the Pope's bull cannot be obeyed, and both cannot be disobeyed. One of them, the Pope's bull, is the law of God. The other, that is, the Queen in Parliament, is no law at all. It pretends to be an act of Parliament, but in the ethics of legislation, it has no more force or value than a solemn enactment that the moon is made of green cheese. It's not a law, but a lie. Parliament doesn't make laws, they pass lies. That's what is taught at Maynooth. That's what Liguori teaches. That's what Roman Catholic canon law demands. He says it emanates from a body which has no real authority. That's right, Parliament and the Queen have no real authority. So the tablet says. The Roman Catholic publication, the official Roman Catholic publication of the time, the tablet, makes this firm proclamation. He says, for both Parliament and the Queen are cut off from the one true source of jurisdiction in the world, the papacy. And what Parliament does not possess, it cannot impart. There's not a law in the statute book which has a particle of force with a Catholic conscience, unless it is countersigned in the Vatican. To disobey such a law is no rebellion. Let me read it again. To disobey the laws of the Parliament is not rebellion. In truth, it is the Parliament and the Queen which are the rebels. They are in rebellion against the Pope. And that is to be in rebellion against God. For the tablet assures us in so many words that the command of the Pope is the law of God. Okay? Can anybody spell blasphemy? The Roman Catholic Church is the church of blasphemy. It's clearly identified in the Scriptures. That little horn with eyes like the eyes of a man, like the Holy See, got to have eyes to see, and a mouth speaking great words against the Most High, great blasphemies against the God of gods. Who else could it be but the papacy? He says, we do not blame the tablet, the official Roman Catholic periodical, for holding these opinions. And farther, we admit that in carrying his purpose of rebellion into effect, he will act most consistently and logically. Believing the Pope to be God on earth, and both Parliament and the Queen in rebellion against God, how can he act otherwise? Were we enlightened and honest papists, we must act in the same way. We should feel that we could not, without renouncing our principles and being condemned by our consciences, obey in matters which violated the revealed and declared will of God. And the tablet holds that the Ecclesiastical Titles Bill is in violation of the revealed will of deity. For the Pope's aggression is the express and revealed will of God, because it is the command of the Pope, and the command of the Pope is the law of God. The tablet, then, and all honest papists have it in their choice to submit to the law of Britain and so disobey God, or to follow the dictates of conscience and so disobey the Queen. We do not, we say, blame the tablet for holding these opinions. What we wish is that the public should be aware that these opinions papists do hold, that if honest and consistent, they must hold them. And not only must they hold them, they must act upon them. The tablet, we say, is the organ of the more respectable Catholics. We find the same sentiments expressed with more emphasis and violence of language, though not in tone more firmly, by the Catholic Vindicator. Okay, this is another official Roman Catholic. It's the organ of the rabble-rousers among the Roman Catholics. They're not quite as civil as the Roman Catholics as they express themselves in the tablet. Let's listen to what is said in the Catholic Vindicator. Quote, rather than that our loyalty to the Holy Apostolic See, that is the Pope, should be in the least degree tarnished, let 10,000 kings and queens, and Queen Victoria included, perish. Let them be deposed from their thrones and become mere individuals, as we have lately seen in the case of a Catholic sovereign. We should not, of course, have spoken so strongly as this under ordinary circumstances, but when the Pope and the Queen are placed in antagonism to each other, as has been the case lately, and it is intimated that Her Majesty will not accept a divided alliance, we are compelled to say plainly which alliance we consider the most important, and we would not hesitate to tell the Queen to her face that she must either be content with this divided alliance or none at all, so far as Catholics are concerned. For it is perfectly certain that come what may, even the rack and the torture, the instruments used by Her Majesty's predecessors in their conflict with Popery, we shall never do otherwise than strictly obey the sovereign pontiff, whoever may presume to forbid it, and in their puny insignificance pronounce the acts of the Vicar of Christ null and void, unquote. So there you have it, directly from another official Roman Catholic publication in Great Britain at the time of this papal aggression. I remember, at first, before the cardinal barged in and divided up the land, Roman Catholics were merely looking for a little leeway to practice their faith. They've been suppressed ever since King Henry VIII. They've been suppressed once again after the Babington plot and the gunpowder plot and the various... How about the Spanish Armada? The Pope sent the entire Spanish fleet to overthrow the Protestant crown of Great Britain. How many attempts were made upon the lives of Protestant kings and queens in England? I mean, it was just out of self-preservation that they passed these laws and kicked the Jesuits out of the country. And after England went back to sleep, forgetting about all of those papal attempts to violently overthrow the country, they began to be sympathetic to the simple cry, we just want a little religious liberty here in Great Britain. So they opened the door a crack, and in barged the Pope, the Cardinal, the dioceses, the bishops, and then the Roman Catholic periodicals began to flood out with declarations that the Queen is no queen, Parliament is no Parliament, we obey no voice but Roman Catholic canon law and the voice of the Vicar of Christ, the Pope. Come hell or high water. That's what happened. This is real history. They don't talk about it in the schools. It's too divisive. You know what it really is? It's too instructive. So this history's been hidden from us. The faster by which we would go back to sleep, and Rome could do it again. Right here in the United States. A once Protestant country, just like Great Britain, who wished to have Christ and Christ only as their king. And the Queen of England was to make sure that no papal tyrant could come in and overthrow Christ. Do you ever see that kind of sentiment here in the United States? Do you know our Bill of Rights was established to maintain liberty from Rome? Our Constitution and Bill of Rights are written in such a way that never could the Pope ever do in this country what he's attempting to do in Great Britain at this very time. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom to keep and bear arms, freedom to be secure in your personal effects, posse comitatus, in charge of your own person. All that's been thrown out the window right before our very eyes. And what's most incredible is nobody suspects Rome. Well, you don't hear anybody on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, anybody saying it's the Vatican, the papacy. History's repeating itself. No, you hear all kinds of talk about the Bilderbergers, the Club of Rome, this group, that group, Central Intelligence Agency, State Department, the Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission. Rome's not mentioned. The papacy's not mentioned. Because if you mention the papacy, you draw all the kind of hell upon you. Okay? You understand? You mention the papacy. Look, I had a World War II veteran tell me one time before he died, Tom, you're getting just too close to the target. How do you know you're getting too close to the target? When you start seeing flak all around you. It's Rome, folks. It's the Vatican. It's the papacy. And we got all these conspiracy nuts out there joining the truth movement, and all their motivation is popularity. Popularity, fame, celebrity, exposure. All they care about is the number of hits on their website, the number of likes on their videos, the most advertising dollars for being so popular. But they wouldn't say Pope if they had a mouthful of it. So they're going to drown in their popularity, and at the same time they're going to level an accusatory finger to me and say, I just don't like his character. Tom's rude. He's domineering. He's got a bad temper. He's loud. He hollers too much. He's not very popular. Therefore, God must not be blessing him. So I'll seek popularity and thereby achieve God's blessing. I got to ask my listeners, who do you think is the called and the chosen in the truth movement? The one who seeks popularity or the one who serves sacrificially? Now, one of the first acts of Cardinal Wiseman after his return from Rome was to remove from the canon of the Mass the prayer for the Queen, and to cause all the missals of his diocese to be changed in order that the obnoxious passage, that is, the prayer for the Queen, might be expunged. The only ground he assigned for his procedure was the impropriety of having the name of a heretical prince, that is the Queen, mixed up with that of the name of the Pope in the Mass. So far as ourselves are concerned, we're thankful that the honored name of the Queen should be rescued from a championship so questionable. Still, the act of the Cardinal is nonetheless significant on that account. It clearly shows that in his opinion, the title of Queen Victoria is invalid, and that her throne is as good as vacant. How much voice do you think? How much Protestant voice do you think is regarded as having any sound at all in Washington, D.C. today?
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.